Okay, we are on to day 5. Today we are working with variables and data structures. You probably have no idea what those are at all. So let me give you a quick rundown of that and then we'll jump right into the code. So first off, you need to understand that in programming there are variables. Now a variable is really just a piece of memory that's holding some information. And the variable itself is a pointer to that memory. So it's like a reminder or a note card or that kind of thing where you say like, hey, there's this piece of information over here, write it down and don't forget it. That's more or less a variable. And we end up using variables a lot in programming because that's how you store and retrieve data. And a lot of programming is really just about storing and retrieving data. So variables are a critical thing that you are going to get practice with, you're going to need to understand, and you're going to use a lot. The other big idea is data structures. Now, a data structure is really just the idea that data, has a structure to it. For example, if you have an address, your address has like the street address, you'd have like a city, you'd have maybe a state or a zip code. If you're international, not in the US, you'd have a slightly different structure. But the point is, there are components, there are these little tiny bits that together, like an address is not a monolithic thing. It's a bunch of smaller components that when you put it together, it's a piece of information. It gets you to a location, right? So that is basically a type of data structure. An address, you could look at it as a combination of variables like your street address, your city, your zip code, your state, those kind of things that in combination makes up a location. That is, an address. So if you were to design how to store an address in a piece of software, which is something as a programmer you'll probably do at least a few times in your career, you would find yourself saying, okay, you'd want like address line 1, maybe address line 2, city, state, zip, those kind of things. And so each of those would be a separate variable. And when you combine them together into a data structure, which different programming languages have ways of doing that, you start having the notion of an address. And the same kind of thing we're going to be using in our journaling software where a daily journal has something like a date of some sort, and it has some text of some sort. So if you took something like a date and text, that starts to look like a journal entry. And a journal entry is the prime sort of data structure we'll be talking about here. So that is just a super high level explanation of a data structure and why it matters. So without any further ado, let's get into the actual nitty-gritty of variables and code and data structures a little bit so that what I just told you makes a little bit more sense.
All right, let's get started learning and using variables and data structures and user input. So we are going to create a new file here. So I'm just going to create a new file, input.py. We'll leave our journal.py file alone for the moment. So we will live here. Now, just so you know, Python 3 input.py does nothing, exactly what we would expect. So let's jump back to hello world for just a minute and let's print hello world. Now you've seen this a million times, you know exactly what's going to happen. Cool, nothing exciting. Now let's talk about a variable. So a variable is a foundational idea in building software, and I'll just demonstrate it for you real quick and then I will show you how it works and why. So hello is going to be our variable. Hello equals hello world, and then we are going to change that to just hello. So we're going to print hello, our variable, and it does exactly the same thing. So what's going on here? Well, hello is a variable. It is a pointer at a memory location basically. So there's a whole bunch of memory inside your computer, and hello in our code just references some location. In that location here, we are storing this text string hello world. So this is like a shorthand for, you know, hey, there's a variable, like there's some memory, put the text in that memory, and then later when I want to reference it, I'm going to call it hello. This is a variable. This is the word hello, and this just references a place in memory where we are storing the string hello world. So you can print it out more than once. You can reference it elsewhere in the code. So we could do something like print something else, and then we can print hello again, and it'll print out again. And so variables allow us to store information in the computer. This is obviously useful. That's how, you know, information is stored in the computer. It's sort of self-evident, right? Now, here's how this becomes useful, because obviously you can print out things. You can print out more than one thing. There's a bunch of ways you could use this. So that's kind of thing one, is variables. Second thing though, is we actually want to get user input. And so we'll actually quick grab some input by using the input function. So input works a lot like print. So input, what is your favorite food? And what that'll do, and I'll just comment out the hello variable, so keep it as simple as possible. What is your favorite food? Steak. Now, it looks like it didn't do much, but here's what happens. So what is your favorite food? Print it out. So this is where the input and the print commands look kind of the same, right? But if you notice, it actually allowed me to type in something which print didn't. Now, this still doesn't seem like it does much, but watch what happens. Now, let's see, we'll call it food. So if we say food equals, so food is a variable, and it equals the result of this input function, we run it, and then say steak. And again, it looks like it's done the same thing, but if we add this bit of code, print food, we have, boom, steak gets printed out. So what this allows us to do is, with this little bit of code, you can then say, oh, my favorite food is steak. So we will store the result of the user input here into food. Now, food could be called anything. It could be called bicycle. And if we called it bicycle, this whole thing would blow up. Now, the reason it blows up is because the name food down here is no longer defined. We changed the variable name to bicycle. So let's change that to bicycle. And it works again. So variable names can be literally anything. There are rules that Python has about variable naming and conventions and so forth, but they don't have to be related to what you think they're related to at all. Now, it's a good idea for them to, and you will be learning more about how to name variables, because that's kind of a hard problem in software development anyways. But, you know, maybe we should call it favorite food, and then obviously let's change the code down here. So you've got favorite food. Cheese. We like cheese. So you get the idea. So that's how we use user input and basically assign the results of user input into a variable. Now let's take this to the next level and use this for the date entry on our program. So for example, we'll just call this journal date. And then, what day is it? Okay. So 12/3/2022. Now, if you actually go back to our journal, I think on our input we had for new, it was date. So let's change it to that so it looks even more like our program. So yeah, that starts to feel a lot more like what we're doing. So that's really great. That gets us a lot closer to what we want. And that's, as you can see, this very much folds into what we were doing previously in Journal, because once we can start getting the date, once we can start getting the journal entry, we could start building out something like the new screen. Like you could imagine that maybe we have input date as that, and then maybe we do kind of the same thing for the rest of the text, and all of a sudden you have what amounts to the new screen. And that's more or less one of the future lessons, but hey, spoiler alert, covered variables, we covered input, and then of course printing those out. So next up is your assignment.
This assignment is really, pretty straightforward. We're going to, first of all, go through and start working with variables, start using variables, start storing things in variables, retrieving them, printing them back out, that kind of thing. That is the first part of this assignment. The second part of this assignment is after you've kind of gone through and you feel like you understand what variables are and how they operate, then you use the Python input command to start practicing interaction with that. And once you've kind of done that, that's pretty much the assignment. So, go back through the demonstration from before, walk through that yourself, write the code, get the code under your fingers, and then I'll see you again tomorrow for even more fun with Python.